Welcome to Chuck's World of Infinite Mojo, brought to you by Holy Chuck Burgers. Our business is burgers.
Good morning, Katarina Witt. There's no such thing as bad boys, only boys with bad hair.
Sponsored by Maxwell's Clothiers, your bespoke tailor since 1961. And now, your host of Chuck's World of Infinite Mojo, Chuck Bastie. And welcome back to another segment of Chuck's World of Infinite Mojo. I'm Cam LaRock, your producer, and of course I'm alongside Chuck Bastie, our host. Chuck, how's it going?
That's me. I'm doing good. Smile on my face today.
It's good to see.
Because it's very rare that we actually get the opportunity to interview a diagnosed psychopath.
Yeah, it should make out for a great show. I'm excited to listen.
Yeah, I just want to give my my viewers a little preamble as well for our guest today, HG Tudor. I first came across HG's content 3 or 4 years ago. I had a friend of mine that was dealing with a narcissist in her life, and I had a little bit of understanding of narcissism at the time, but then she said that she went online and found this diamond in the rough of an absolute gem, a knowledge vault, as it were, of H.G. Tudor's work, that he was actually a diagnosed psychopath. He was also diagnosed with NPD, narcissistic personality disorder. And I'm like, well, that doesn't make any sense because they're just, supposedly these narcissists are supposed to be unaware.
Yeah, that's what you'd think.
Yeah, so he's got to be faking this. And as I went on his platform to do my due diligence, it turned out he just had a plethora, and I mean a ton of content, hundreds of hours on YouTube, and it really has changed my view. I mean, everything that you see on narcissism online usually comes from a clinical psychologist talking about narcissism. It never comes from the source, so we're really fortunate today. And we actually have had HG on the show in 2021. So I'm not going to defer back to the old content of what is narcissism. If you want to do that, we'll leave the links into the bio below. And you can watch the very first interview with HG as well. And we're just going to take this as a more advanced conversation towards narcissism.
Yeah, sounds good. Would you like to bring HG into the show right now?
Let's do that. Let's bring up the name.
It sounds about the right time. There's HG there.
What a good-looking guy.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
How are you doing, HG?
I'm very well, Chuck. Thank you for asking. Thank you for inviting me onto the show today. Looking forward to speaking with you both.
Yeah,
well, I'm actually the pleasure is all ours because
absolutely.
I'm a big fan of your work. First time. What's the saying? Long time listener, first time caller. Having a narcissist on the show that can speak to the topic so much, I think you add a lot of value to the conversation. So I really want to thank you for coming on the show.
You're welcome.
All right, Cameron, we will see you on the back end of the show, mate.
Yeah, I'll dip out of here. I'll leave you guys to it. Thank you, and thank you for joining us, HG.
Thank you, Cam.
You bet. Okay, so it's been 1.5 years or so since we had you on the show last, HG, and that was right during the pandemic. So I just thought maybe we'd just start off a little bit with like how you found your audience, your vibe of people that were searching for. I mean, there's a lot more anxiety and in the world right now after the pandemic. I always say the mental health crisis was almost a second pandemic as well. But did you find the same as well?
Well, during the pandemic, there's obviously a lot of people were accessing online content to a greater degree rather than going out and meeting their friends in a bar or going for a walk with them or going to the cinema with them, etc. So there's a lot more interaction that occurred, but also it provided an opportunity, of course, for instances where there were numerous occasions where people found themselves almost shacking up with people because of lockdown and finding that, well, okay, I might not ordinarily do this, but I'm going to because it's lockdown, and then not realizing, and I did 2 or 3 videos about instances where this happened, of people who found themselves with the narcissist and didn't realize, and the circumstances of the lockdown obscured their ability to see what was going on. Because often a narcissist will move very quickly to bring you under control by causing you to spend a lot of time with them. And of course, the lockdown provided an excellent excuse for certain narcissists to do that by saying, hey, why don't we live together? Or, we've just started seeing one another. There's about to be a lockdown, or there's a lockdown coming, or lockdowns occurred. This is going to present a problem for us seeing one another. We need to form our sort of bubble, that you have this sort of household bubble. So why don't I come and live with you, or why don't you come and live with me? So there are instances where that was happening. And later on, people realized, oh dear, that was a problem. And they didn't see it at the time because they just thought to themselves, yeah, that kind of makes sense, doesn't it? I like this person, we get on well. I don't want to lose out seeing them, so let's form a household together. And they fell straight into the clutches of a narcissist.
Yeah, amazing point. I think in my own personal life, what I found is on my socials or on my in my community, while we're in lockdown, there was a lot more people in my realm, and I'll call them empaths as well, who are more empathic, that just like you described, moved in with someone right away or locked down. Because I think one of the things that we all missed on this is if we look at addicts, if they escape for a certain amount of time with their alcohol, drugs, sex, internet, gambling, shopping, whatever their poison is, it's easy to identify that addiction point. But for sober people, like I'll say sober people, when they had their freedoms reduced and their abilities and choices to be reduced, their anxiety started going through the roof. And I think that was the very first time that we've ever been able to see that anxiety at that level, where sober people were now had their threat to control exposed, and they started making different choices or compromises. And then obviously, when they get stuck in these positions, just like an addict of any type, they lash out. They actually need to get their power back as well. So I think that was one of the biggest things that we found out, that I found out with the pandemic, is how they dealt with that lack of control in their life, very similar towards a narcissist.
Well, it's a form of an effect on their control, but obviously we wouldn't see it as the same way as that a narcissist needs, because of course, human beings as a species have evolved to be sociable creatures.
Yeah.
Tens of thousands of years ago, they operated best in a group of some 200 to 250 people. And the way that they behaved for generation after generation after generation after generation was that you sat and talked to one another around the campfire. You looked after one another's children. You hunted together. You gathered together. You assisted one another. And so that is how Homo sapiens has been created. And then all of a sudden, tens of thousands of years later, when you are forced into a situation of not being allowed to socialize with other people, that is entirely unnatural to the way that Homo sapiens has evolved. And so it makes them feel anxious because they're not designed to be sole practitioners, if you will.
Yeah, fair point. I wanted to try and get into a couple of the topics that I've been really struggling with, and I'm going to bring some insight into the world as well. Just off camera, when you joined us, we were talking about how crazy the world is right now. And I think the ramifications of the pandemic plus added fuel on that fire has made things a really interesting time to live in. I'll leave it at that for that. But what I'm finding, and I want to get your take on this, is now that I've been able to access, your information, your website, your content on YouTube, the Knowledge Vault, all these things that you give people an understanding of how a narcissist thinks and how they react and how they, obviously go for the manipulation, all the tactics that narcissists use in order to get control. The leadership inside of the world these days is now kind of been exposed maybe to myself, or I'm able to better see traits of narcissism in there. And there's a couple of videos as well, one particularly with Andrew Gold that you were on, about the different types of problems that would be involved with different types of narcissists in leadership positions. And I just start right there as well, because it's easy for people to say, that leader is a narcissist without going to the subcategories of what type of narcissist they are, what the cadre is, or their school. and then figure out what types of problems that this narcissist would dictate. So I thought maybe we just start with that and you could just speak to that.
Well, as you know, a narcissist requires 4 things that I call the prime aims: control, fuel, character traits, and residual benefits. And there are many routes to market to get to those things. There are various environments which cater to those things better than others. But power in some shape or form, whether it's political power, military power, economic power, financial power, popularity power, that power enables a narcissist to control people. It allows the narcissist access to potentially millions of people, so astronomical amounts of fuel. It allows access to lots of character traits and residual benefits. So an environment which provides access to power, politics, industry, entertainment, for example, are always going to attract a lot of our kind. And as a consequence of that, many of those environments not only attract a lot of our kind, but it means that that environment of itself becomes one where our kind are the best at navigating their way through it. And that if you're not a narcissist, doesn't mean you won't succeed. Of course, people who are non-narcissists still succeed, but it can make it far more difficult. And this is where you get the creation, this idea of it being sort of viper's nest and so forth. And the individuals then that get their hands on the decision making, get their hands upon the the means of production, the means of banking, the means of telling the world this is how it is. They then colour, to put it mildly, the way that the world is for so many people, because the views, outlook, conduct and behaviour of the narcissist is then transposed into those environments. So, for instance, somebody who has political power is only going to be interested in what it serves them, and they operate without a conscience. Now, some narcissists, of course, will operate with a facade. So it looks like they care, but ultimately they don't. And that reflects in their decision-making power and the way that they conduct themselves. Similarly, you'll have individuals within the creative arts who will treat certain people around them very badly, will seem like it will be a superstar to many millions of admirers because they don't have to deal with them regularly. But what they do is they colour a view of the world. So, for instance, as I've explained this many times before, in music and in art and in literature and poetry, narcissists commandeer the positions of being able to describe what they see as love and romance and affection, and they colour the world's view of what those things are. So they create an idea that love is about crawling over broken glass for somebody and that you would walk the earth for them. No, it isn't. But that's created by our kind. So the problem that people have, and they often don't recognize this, is that my kind get into these positions of power and influence because they serve our pursuit of the prime aim so spectacularly well. And then we are able to set an agenda and narrative which is in accordance with what we require, which isn't invariably good for everybody else.
Yeah, and there's just different classifications on how I think we see that, we as being neurotypicals in our leaders. And I think, the best example that I think that you've used before, and you've had this topic raised a number of times on your site, is the example of Donald Trump. And I want to be clear here, this isn't a political conversation. This isn't a right or a left or a left wing, a woke side or a conservative side conversation. I'm only interested right now in dealing with the psychopathy of Donald Trump or a leader. Like I'll use mine as a Commonwealth, Canadian, as Justin Trudeau. I voted for Justin Trudeau 3 different times, and I can't stand the guy. Like I really, really can't stand the guy. Mm-hmm. A different type of narcissist. I always say the good type of narcissist, the charismatic one, lots of like deflections, not as toxic, I think, as Donald Trump shows on the media. He's not as petulant as a child, a little bit more well-behaved, a little bit, more well groomed for the position. But with the pending indictment of Donald Trump coming up, I think there's still a conversation, especially in the United States, along the Republican ranks, of not recognizing or just not accepting the fact that Donald Trump is a first ballot Hall of Fame, checks every box, toxic narcissist. And there is seems to be no line in the sand for them to like not jump on board him and keep, going along with his rhetoric and his policies that really don't serve the people. But they don't see that, and it just blows me away. Is that my emotional thinking that sees that?
Well, what you've got to also consider is when you commented there that it doesn't serve the people. Well, it depends what your perspective is, because he proved to actually be very popular and many, many people voted for him. And in the last election, it was a very close run thing. There are some that maintain that he was robbed. There are others that say, well, he wasn't, and that he lost, but he didn't lose by much. And that shows the level of popularity that he had. So he had to be doing something right for all of those people who vote for him. And so it's all about your perspective. And it's like with anything, it goes back to the old adage of one man's terrorist is another man's freedom fighter. So you can look at it. What I find is that somebody like Donald Trump as a narcissist is in a way more honest in his dealings than he is with Justin Trudeau, because Trump doesn't pretend to be anything other than I'm right, you're wrong, and that's the way that it is. And what you see is what you get. Whereas with Trudeau, he puts on this image of caring when actually he doesn't. So you could actually say he's somewhat more dishonest than Donald Trump. And I'm not here to defend either of them as politicians, but merely to point out that a narcissist, of course, can very much serve a purpose for somebody, and you can admire that person. And if their views happen to accord with yours, then often the narcissist is the person that gets the job done, because the narcissist's need for those prime aims gives them the urge and endeavor to get over the line. So, for instance, when Trump talks about, I'm going to make America great again, what he's actually saying is, what's good for Donald Trump is good for America. Yeah. So if America's great, that means I'm great. Now, many people would say, that's awful. And then there'll be a lot of other people who go, well, actually, I don't have an issue with that, because if he makes this country better than it was, and he thinks that's all down to him, what do I care? So with certain narcissists, of course, their drive to achieve that, your views are naturally going to be colored by where you sit in the political persuasion. So you'll find, you'll be able to find 10 people who think that Trump was the worst thing that happened to the United States, and you can go and find another 10 who will tell you who's the best thing that happened to the United States. And that's what happens with different perspectives. And different narcissists, of course, have a different level of applicability. The very fact that he got to where he did demonstrates that a level of success. And there'll be others that will say, I'm sick and tired of hearing about spin. I don't want somebody from a political dynasty. I'm not interested in being dictated to by a technocratic meritocracy any longer. I want a guy who rolls his sleeves up and he calls it what it is. Therefore, that appeals to me. He gets people into employment. He makes jobs. He calls a spade a spade. I don't want all of the spin and all of the euphemisms. He appeals to me. Other people go, oh, he's ghastly. He's not a statesman. He on the world stage, he embarrassed the United States, the way that he behaved with Angela Merkel, the way that he shoved himself to the front in a photo opportunity, those things. So you can pick and choose with the narcissist, that a narcissist has certain things which will prove to be strengths and also certain weaknesses.
Yeah, and I don't want to make this a political thing, because obviously it's not. It's about like having a look at the leadership and noticing where the narcissists are in place and what purpose they serve, or how they serve their own purposes. Like that's just been more. Justin Trudeau in Canada has been caught on 2 ethics violations where he's actually sat and apologized for doing said, breaking of the law. And we as Canadians is like, oh, well done, it was a brilliant apology, oh, thank you for that, very nice, thanks for offering that, the repentance is accepted and feel free to break the law again, which he's done. And I always look at this and say, to the Liberals, I'm like, what would this guy have to do to break the law that you would scream at the top of your lungs that a right-wing politician would do the exact same thing, and yet you just don't care because he's your guy? I think we need to be a little bit more objective with that. I go back to Obama, where Obama is a more aware narcissist. Yes. I think obviously Trump is obviously the lesser narcissist and very unaware, and couldn't have that conversation with him. But I think it's easier for us to deal with a aware narcissist such as yourself, the ultra, as opposed to dealing with the petulant child narcissist that just can't behave himself.
Well, it depends upon the proximity that you have of the relationship with the type of narcissist. I think, generally speaking, that people, if they're talking about their political leaders, many people will find it easier to deal with a more polished narcissist, of which you can have both unaware and aware. But you take, for example, just recently Boris Johnson, the former Prime Minister of the United Kingdom. Now, he's an aware narcissist, and he's just appeared in front of a select committee where basically he was told, you set the rules and then you broke them, and you knew that you were breaking them, in relation to him basically having a bit of a knees up during lockdown. And yet there are still people who, notwithstanding the fact that he's told lie after lie after lie, notwithstanding the fact that everywhere Boris has been, he has left carnage behind him, apart from for Boris Johnson. This is a man who doesn't even recognise one of his children as being his child, who cheated on his ex-wife Marina Wheeler and took up with his new wife, that has repeatedly shafted people. And as Sir Max Hastings once memorably said, the only people that like Boris Johnson are the people that don't actually know him. And that's actually quite an accurate description for many narcissists, that whether you have distance to the narcissist, whether it's your favorite pop star or sports person or political leader, you don't have to put up with them on a day-to-day basis manipulating you. You are always being manipulated in some shape or form because they're a narcissist, but you don't have to put up with the granular nitty-gritty of the manipulations. And so with Boris Johnson, you have a man who, as the Prime Minister, has repeatedly lied, has caused major problems for many people, and yet there are still many people who would have him back as Prime Minister tomorrow because he operates a charisma. And what you often find with certain narcissists, Joe, is that they operate the halo effect, which means that there's a central charismatic aspect of the narcissist behavior that allows everything else to be overlooked. And you can keep saying, yeah, we know he's told lies. Yeah, I know that, but, or, he's broken so many promises. Yeah, I recognize that. But at the end of the day, he was the guy that got Brexit done. And so that gained a lot of kudos with many people. So there's this halo effect that exists with many narcissists and their victims, where they can see that the narcissist has caused problems, but there's this overriding factor that deletes all of that or overrides it, so that no matter what the narcissist does, they're always seen in a favorable light by their victims. And that's particularly true when it comes to those victims which are distanced from the narcissist, i.e. you're not having a romantic relationship with them and they're not in your family. The ones where you're a citizen and they're your leader, instances where you buy a ticket to go and watch their rock show, or you buy their technology and such like. Even though you might realize that this person isn't a thoroughly unpleasant person to their children and they've got a string of ex-spouses, you'll still think, yeah, but he's a great sportsman and that's what I go and watch him for. So we often benefit from this halo effect.
I'm almost very curious. Sometimes I'll sit there and just wonder, what would HG think about this? Because I think you've got a very unique perspective of looking into the world, knowing what you know, seeing how the world works according to how narcissists are leaders in the world. And then you see the reaction to the people who are just smokescreened by what you can see in the narcissism as the four traits that what you're talking about. But people with the emotional thinking like myself, crickets, we don't see that. Or we don't want to believe that, or we don't want to accept that, because we want to see the good in people, or believe that everybody inherently, has altruistic themes of what they want and how they want to be able to be inclusive and all this sort of thing. What's your view of how the world works inside of that narcissistic leadership, of what you can see and the reaction that you see in the world of like how what's playing out, and you're just like, I can't believe you people are falling for this. This is all this trick in the book, and yet we still can't see it.
It doesn't surprise me in the slightest that people repeatedly fall for this. They have since the dawn of time, and they always will do. And the reason for it is that people, they have a herd mentality, and rather than go in the direction of taking their information from a variety of sources and, evaluating it, the world is becoming more and more intellectually lazy. And the reason for it is that people, they have a herd mentality, and rather than go in the direction of taking their information from a variety of sources and evaluating it, the world is becoming more and more intellectually lazy. And the reason for it is that people, they have a herd mentality, and rather than go in the direction of taking their information from a variety of sources and evaluating it, the world is becoming more and more intellectually lazy. People want to be spoon-fed. They want to get their food fast. They want their content streamed to them instantaneously. They don't want to wait 3 weeks to buy that hoodie. They want it tomorrow. And the consequence of that means that the provision of information comes at them bang, 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 bang. And what they do is, rather than think, okay, this is the reportage of something going on in Taiwan, I'm going to go and now look for that information from 4 or 5 different sources, different political perspectives, and then I can form a reasoned view as to what I think is going on. Because when it comes, of course, to the provision of news, it's always somebody else's perspective. The only way you will ever get an unvarnished perspective is your own, by going and witnessing the event that's occurring. So let's take, for example, at the moment, as a consequence of the behavior of another narcissist, Emmanuel Macron in France, the French, they always love a good revolution, so they're forming the barricades and kicking off. Now, so you get some reportage about all of that. Some news outlets aren't mentioning it. Others mention it from a particular perspective. Others give it a wholesale load of coverage. So what are you meant to think about all of that? Well, the best way, of course, would be you would go there and witness what's going on and form a view and talk to people and basically become your own journalist. But of course, not everybody can do that. Not everybody has the time to do that. So what you have to do is the next best thing, which is take your evidence from a variety of sources and then form a view. But most people don't. And that makes them so very easy to control. Because all you do is then pump out by a particular news outlet a certain type of information, create echo chambers, which is what social media has done, and it's made people even easier to control than ever before. And notwithstanding the people then who will say, that then generates conspiracy theories and so forth, and they'll say, well, just because it's a conspiracy theory, it doesn't mean it's not correct. Well, often they are incorrect, but that's another point for another occasion. But the point is that people become easier and easier to control with regard to the provision of information, because that they have been given so much information so quickly and so easily that it's become like a pig at a farm who doesn't actually know how to go out and forage for food. So just takes what's put in front of him. And he accepts that food, whether it's nutritious or not, because it's easy. And it's the same with most human beings, not all, but with most, that those individuals that control the flow of information, control the money, and so forth, they're not acting in some spectre like James Bond cabal. They don't work together, they work against one another. But what happens is that because human beings have basically become lazier in their minds and don't question things to the extent that they ought to, because of their need for instant gratification, it's become a little bit like the film Idiocracy, which I don't know if you've seen. Luke Wilson is in it, where basically people who are intelligent think about the ramifications of having a child and therefore either don't have any or have fewer, whereas people who don't think about it end up having 10 children and they're all stupid because their parents are stupid, and thus it breeds it, and they all want instant gratification and so on and so forth. And so it's just become easier to control people because they will not critically assess material.
You lead me into my my second point with this, with the the toxic leadership out there in the religious ranks. So where I came from an Irish Catholic background, baptized Catholic. Got involved with a cult in the 80s when my parents joined this religious kind of walls. It was a cult, no doubt about it. Looking at it now, I can see where the narcissists were in control of people's lives and the carnage it ruined. But just like you said, there was lambs to the slaughter that, just like that pig, only knew what time feeding time was and came to the trough every single Saturday to get their spiritual food, and got it delivered to them the way they felt comfortable with how they wanted that in their life. And they made these choices very, very unawarely, in my view. But at the same time,
the two most effective ways of controlling individuals are through fear and reward. which is basically sex and money or death. And so if you say to somebody, if you do what I say that you should do and you give me 10% of your income, you will live in eternal salvation. If you don't, you'll be upside down in some flaming shit for the rest of eternity. Which one do you want to choose? And of course, these are people who aren't educated, who follow a herd mentality and think, well, I better hand over 10% of my income to the church and go and say my prayers and live accordingly to what they tell me I should do, and then I'll be granted salvation. And of course, it's not like they're going to come back and go, hang on a second, this bloke was lying. I'm just worm food now, because he's just worm food, so he can't tell you. So religion, whilst on an individual level provides many people with a gratifying life, and that's fair enough, but it's another tool for control that's utilized, and it just harnesses those two greatest motivators, reward or fear. And so that's what happens. And because people are frightened, they're frightened of losing their income, they're frightened of becoming unwell, they're frightened of that person over there because he's not got the same skin color as me, or that he walks differently to me, or he has certain cultural values. It means that it's very easy to control people. And my kind take advantage of that. Why? Because we are designed, like a shark is designed to eat things and swim through the ocean. We are designed to control everything around us. And therefore, we will, when we get to the top of the tree, look for particular ways which make it easier for us to control mass populations. And so we do.
You did a video about Kenneth Copeland, and
Yes.
and this guy's a real beauty. I mean, I'm a hockey guy, and we use that word beauty, not as a as a good thing. But I mean, if you look at in Kenneth Copeland's eyes when he's having this little narcissistic rant, a threat to control, whether it be the reporter calling him on something he doesn't want to talk about or outing him or whatever, to me, it's scary. My intuition goes right to like, wow, something's wrong here, or this guy is a kook, or whatever that is. These are the adjectives that we might use to identify without understanding the narcissism at work. Then there's a guy like Joel Osteen, who is just the most charismatic, sweet as pie narcissist that just leads 18,000 people every Sunday to have them buy his books, and totally different approach to it. Obviously, this is where your work comes into, where you can subcategorize the narcissists as well. But I thought we could just speak a little bit more to the Joel Osteens and the Kenneth Copelands and how they control the masses in the United States with their religious right.
So with Kenneth Copeland, although I always reject the suggestion that my kind of demons, people often say, narcissists are just demons. I have a degree of understanding that if you were to watch Mr. Copeland in action, you would think that's a demon right there, because there's the footage which many people have seen where he's been doorstepped in his motor vehicle by a reporter asking him about his private jets. And you can see the fury fighting to get out, and that he's also fighting to keep it under control. And he goes from this icy glare towards the reporter to this manic rictus grin, and in an instant. And it's a fantastic example, as you pointed out. I've done a few videos about him. Now, with him, his approach is more, I'm a blunt instrument in beating up Satan. Because any man that can appear on a stage and basically decide that he's going to get rid of COVID by blowing into the air,
projecting it,
ejecting, in the name of Jesus Christ, I banish thee. He is demonstrative of the level of delusion that he experiences, but he caters more to that sort of blunt instrument style of, I'm in your face, I tell you how it's done. And he's more about you better behave yourself or else the big man upstairs will want to have a word with you. Whereas with Joel Osteen, he is much more of your sort of sugary, I really care, but is no less of a narcissist than Copeland is. In fact, he has come up on my radar, and I'll be doing a few videos about him in due course. I had no awareness of either of them until a couple of people put me onto them. And then watching them in action, it soon became clear of what they are. So Copeland's a bit more rudimentary. He does operate a facade, but it's more a case of I do what it says on the tin, and you might not like my methods, but there we are. And people, there'll be quite a lot of people who are afraid of him, that they'd be afraid that he would take action against him. So there's that instance where he's at one of his gatherings, and there's a gentleman in a wheelchair, and he goes over and looks to heal him, and he actually shoves him backwards, and he falls out of the wheelchair. And he dismissively just goes, no, he'll be okay, and walks off. Doesn't check if he's okay. And it's that kind of brash charisma of I'm Kenneth Copeland, so I'm allowed to do this. It doesn't matter that he didn't do it intentionally, but he caused the man to fall out of his wheelchair as he was driving whatever demons were polluting him out of him, but then just walks away from it because he can. Whereas you could imagine with Joel, if he happened to do that, he'd be immediately getting down there to help the man back up, and he operates more of a caring facade, whereas Copeland's is more dismissive in the way that he behaves. So two interesting styles of narcissists, but both of them narcissists.
There's a great meme of a picture of Joel Osteen and his trophy wife, talking about, their faith and everything like that. And then somebody took that picture and then put a caption on it that said, "We saved 100% of our taxes by switching to Jesus." And I thought exactly. I thought that was absolutely brilliant. What I wanted to ask you, but go ahead.
No, so please carry on.
I was going to ask you. So when you see this, I'm almost wondering at this point, with the people who are, we'll call them sheeple, but people who want to see the good in what they believe, and they want Joel Osteen to be how they want him to be, versus really truly seeing for him the monster that he is. My question is, these psychopathic narcissists that are religious right leaders and evangelicals that do all this and hoard all this money, do they have a moment in their narcissism where they can sit inside of their riches, their mansions, their private jets, and really say to themselves, wow, it's amazing that I don't believe in Jesus or God, and these people follow me, and I just got a great run, and I'm just going to ride this shit out and be able to collect all the tithes that they're sending me like idiots? Do they have that thought in their mind where they can really say to themselves that they don't believe in God? They're just using it as a vehicle to enrich themselves.
Well, an aware narcissist would do. Most are unaware. So they really truly do believe that they believe in God, and they truly believe that what they're doing is correct and right, and they are incapable of seeing that they're conning people. And even though you can see that they're conning people, they can't. And that's why they're so
more terrifying.
That's why they're so effective at what they do, because they're driven by an absolute belief that what they're doing is correct. But in a way, equally terrifyingly, with an aware narcissist will do something and know, I don't really believe in all of this, but it still suits me and gets me what I want. So there we are. And in a way, you might regard that just as shocking, that someone can be so flippant that they can basically wear their religion like a cloak and a hat, and then they get home and take it off. And you see, there will be some individuals who they will lead a pious life, and they're narcissists, and they essentially always behave themselves. They, of course, are duping people in terms of getting their money. Then there'll be other narcissists that will come along who they will preach, be faithful and you must be chaste, etc. And then they go home and immediately they're rolling around with 10 prostitutes. And if you were to point out that their behavior was wrong, their narcissism would tell them that it wasn't, that they are allowed to behave differently, and they would justify it. They can't see that what they're doing is hypocritical. Then you'll have another narcissist that's aware who goes, yeah, I roll around with the prostitutes because I can. And sure, yeah, it's hypocritical, but guess what? I don't care. So many narcissists don't see that they're hypocrites. Some do, but don't care and will just do what they want to do.
I'd be remiss if I didn't ask you for your prediction for this, but here it is. It's the 27th of March, 2023. and we're looking for an indication of Donald Trump being indicted. And I always would like to say I would like to do a before and after of the people that you work with narcissism, trying to understand narcissism, getting it, accepting it, being educated and knowledgeable about it, and what the transition of what the spectrum would be like from where they started to where they ended. Because your predictions of the pathology of it is 100% always on point. So it almost seems like you're almost a predictor of life, of how things go, because us with emotional thinking, we think, oh, that would never happen. And you just kind of sit back there and laugh, oh, watch this. So my question is, where do you see the pathology of Trump's reaction when he gets indicted, and what is now going to be the fallout or the carnage from the narcissistic theory that's about to happen?
Well, indicting him, of course, is a threat to his control, but he has an absolute belief that he's not done anything wrong, and therefore.
Does he really, though?
Yeah.
He's just that unaware as his subtype that he really truly cannot see that he has done anything wrong whatsoever.
No, he hasn't done anything wrong in his world. His narcissism is a hermetically sealed defense mechanism. And so what will happen is, of course, he will blame it on other people trying to do him down. Now, in some instances, that's accurate because he poses a considerable threat to, guess what? Some other narcissists.
Yeah.
And so those other narcissists will fabricate evidence for the purposes of trying to convict Donald Trump. In some instances, there is no fabrication, but in Donald Trump's world, it is, because his narcissism tells him that, because it can't allow him to accept that he's done anything wrong, and therefore that he could end up going to prison. So his narcissism always tells him, basically, it's like somebody stood behind him whispering, saying, "You've done nothing wrong, Donald. They're just out to get you. They're the ones that are liars." So he goes, "That's fake news. That never happened. There is a group of people that are frightened of me." Now, he's accurate to some extent. There are a group of people that are frightened of him. But even if they were not, he would still say that because his narcissism would tell him that's the case, in order to ensure that he maintains that belief that he's done nothing wrong. So any indictment that occurs, he will fight. He will never, ever roll over. And he will never roll over because his narcissism will not allow him to do it. Furthermore, he has so many people that still support him that provides a means for his narcissism to also say, maintain this position of not being in the wrong. He has to do that to reject the threat to control, but it also serves a purpose for him to assert control over millions of people because they still believe in him. So his narcissism says, we have to reject this suggestion that he's done wrong because that's a threat to control. And at the same time, we want to maintain control over these millions of supporters. And the appropriate way of doing that is to maintain that he has done nothing wrong. So it serves multiple purposes for him.
I almost want to think this is going to be like the house of cards of narcissism that are all going to fall connected to each other, narc on narc action, as you say.
No, all that happens, Chuck, is that if you lose one, you pull the lever and you're invariably replaced by another one. And you see this repeatedly in certain regimes, that you get the left-wing coup d'etat, and then they're deposed. And guess who's got the drive, single purposeness, the minerals to want to do it? Another narcissist, but it comes from the right, and then so he replaces the one on the left, and on it goes.
And I have no doubt that's going to happen. I guess my question is like when Donald Trump's threat to control goes down, and he's indicted, and then from all sides, 3-4 different areas, because he's going to get indicted 3 or 4 different ways from 3 or 4 different sources. Invariably, his circle is now going to expand to other people who've enabled him, the narcissists in those parts of the political side, that are now going to fall by him going down. He's like, I'm taking everybody at scorched earth. Is that what's going to happen?
Well, he's not going to go into some meltdown and suddenly go like Arnie, going Uzi 9mm and shooting everything around him. But rather, what he will do, where it suits him, he will throw people under the bus. He'll put bodies on the fire. But remember, he's no fool. And although he's not a polished operator, you don't get to become the president of the United States without having something about you, aided and abetted by his narcissism, of course. So he is able to lean on people, and he will do, in order to ensure that he gets favors and so forth. So he will fight this, and he'll fight this because of his indefatigable belief that he is right. He will fight this because of the level of support that he'll have, and it is not a foregone conclusion that he will go down at all.
There is a great moment in the movie A Few Good Men with Tom Cruise, Jack Nicholson, where the lieutenant colonel who is under Jack Nicholson's character was sitting in a hotel room under lock and key to be a key witness, and he was having this conversation with Tom Cruise, and Tom Cruise is like, this guy could just make an entire flight disappear. And Marcus just kind of looks at him, just completely like oblivious, going, listen, Nathan Jessup's about to be appointed to be like the Joint Chiefs of this. You don't get to that level without knowing how to sidestep a few landmines.
Exactly.
And I watched that as well, and it was like after like seeing your content and being able to see that, I missed that entirely, because in that instance, I am Tom Cruise's character that I'm just like flabbergasted. Like, what do you mean he could get away with this? This is crazy. Like, nobody would stand for this. And then the other side of that, just like the complete like, oh, look at you, you're so cute. You don't understand how it works. You just don't know, because you're so guarded in your emotional thinking that you just don't know, dude. Like, no, like you don't get to that level without knowing how the game works and being able to jockey around that position. And this is Donald Trump.
Well, you see, again, part of the creation of the narrative that we do is in the films and the books is to create this idea that good always succeeds, that the knight will slay the dragon and rescue the princess. So people then translate that into real life and think good will prevail. In real life, there is no good, there is no evil, there is only your side. And the concept of good and evil is your perspective. And so a lot of people all align together, and they have an idea that they are good. So let's, take, for example, do you think that there are people in the Middle East that think they are evil as they are portrayed in many Hollywood films? Of course not. No. They actually think that people in the West are evil. But then the people in the West will go, no, we're not evil. We're not the ones going around blowing people up with car bombs or flying planes into tower blocks and so forth. But then those people will say, well, yes, but your nation comes and invades my nation upon a pretext of weapons of mass destruction that never existed.
Right.
And you all roundly, many of you supported that.
And then they admitted it.
Yeah, indeed, and then admitted it. And so the point is that it's never, ever so clearly defined as people would like it to be. What we do is we create this idea of there being good and there being evil, and it's very easy to identify. That man is wearing a striped jersey and a mask with a bag marked swag. He's an evil because he's a burglar. And that gentleman there wearing a suit, he is a kind businessman that's creating money in order to ensure people have jobs. Well, actually, that gentleman there is a chimney sweep, and he's just going about his honest living, and the other gentleman in a suit isn't paying his taxes and is putting in fraudulent applications for COVID loans, which is never going to apply back. So we create this idea of what good and evil looks like, what good and bad is, but in actual fact, it's far less clear-cut. And when you get in and amongst it, that's why so many people will struggle in these decision-making scenarios, because it's never so obvious as to say, that's good and that's bad, therefore I can make that decision in support of that because it's good. It isn't that easy. There are so many conflicting interests that it's easy for my kind, because we don't follow what's good for you or bad for you. We follow what's good for us. That's what guides our decision-making system. So a non-narcissist will be sat there and going, I don't know what to do, because if I do this, there's that upside but that downside in option A. Option B, there's this upside but that downside. Option C, they're virtually indistinguishable. What do I do? A narcissist just looks at it and decides, subconsciously, which one gives me control, which one gives me most fuel, character traits and residual. It's C. I'll do C. And when everybody criticizes it for them, his mind's going, why are they criticizing me? They're all idiots, because they don't understand. Because he doesn't stand there and think, oh shit, I fucked up. Yeah, I chose C, didn't I? That was a really bad decision, because now I come to look at it. He doesn't. His narcissism tells him, you were right, you were right, you were right. They are all wrong. Yeah, but 7 million people can't all be wrong. Yes, they can. They're all idiots. They're called Labour voters, or they're Democrats, or whatever. That's how the narcissist dismisses them.
Gotcha. I just wanted to add to your Iraq points, where I was saying to a couple of friends of mine, we were talking about Star Wars, and we're talking about, like Rebel goes against the Alliance, that's who happens to be Luke Skywalker. But the viewpoint is like everyone thinks they're the Luke Skywalker. Yep. And I said to them, like, well, I mean, like, here's how I see it as a neutral third party, Canadian, which we apologize for everything.
Indeed.
But if you lived in another world where some person from the Middle East came into America, attacked your country without declaring war on you, took your leader, tried them for their form of war crimes, killed them, how do you think that would go over in the United States? And they're just like, oh, there'd be atomic war. That would never happen. We would never let that happen to us, because that's why we spend more on defense than the next 9 countries combined. So that way something like that doesn't happen. I'm like, but when you do it, it's freedom. Yep. When, your leader just he's mopping up a plan that Pappy just didn't clean up on aisle 4 to take out Iraq when he was going, and then Clinton comes in and takes over the role. And now he needs to finish the job for all of his, military industrial complex contractors that didn't get paid, 8 years before that. And now, we're going to redo it. And how do we do this? Like, you just kind of like pretend you did. Oh, sorry, we messed up. There wasn't any weapons of mass destruction, but they're Muslims and they're bad. So we should probably take them out anyway. And nobody cared. And that's the way it looked. So before we go, I wanted to finish off on the poor Ginger that's just getting the shit kicked out of him in LA these days, and his narcissistic wife, Meghan Markle. And I'll apologize for a little bit of what we had as far as influence in Canada in enabling her in our country before they went down to the United States and camped out in LA where all the glam is. But you've got a tremendous amount of interest level in Meghan Markle, obviously the royalty in the UK, worldwide, and you've got a lot of content. I mean, a ton of content on Meghan Markle. And I thought we could just speak to that a little bit about your content, and then we'll go into your website and your Tudor scope and the Knowledge Vault as well.
Sure. Well, I was the first person to state that she was a narcissist, and I did so many years ago.
Like way ahead of the curve.
Yeah, way ahead of the curve, and I wrote about it. And then I did a bit of an update. And then when I was started up a new YouTube channel, the Ultra channel, I used the existing work on her to create a very royal narcissist part 1. And then I did an update part 2. And then more things started to happen. And I noticed a lot of people were interested. And they were interested when I wrote about it. And I actually find her dull as ditch water, but a very useful tool for teaching about narcissism. Because I've had many people come to me and say, I didn't know anything about narcissism until I listened and watched your videos about Harry's wife. And now I understand that my husband is one, or my brother is one. And it's woken people up to it, which is the purpose of why I do those videos. Also, there are so many people who are interested in her because they just simply do not like her, that it enables my videos to have greater reach, which then means that they might access more of my work. So that's advantageous. But she provides such a prolific example of narcissism in action, but in terms of the various facets of her narcissism, the way that she needs control, the way she deals with the threats to control, the way that she manages a facade, the way that she causes collateral consequences. She also has so many different dynamics in the way she treats Harry, the way that she's dealt with her extended family in terms of the royal family and disengaging from them and continuing to smear them, the way that she's dealt with her own father and her half siblings rather. So she really is the gift that keeps on giving, and she provides so much material, both in terms of her preoccupation and necessity of keeping appearing on in the news, but also the media knows that there are many people who are interested in her, and therefore they keep writing about her and talking about her, so that there's just a wealth of material. And I've expressed it before, and I'll express it again, that I experience frustration where, for instance, I'll do a set of excellent videos about a man who theoretically could cause nuclear Armageddon, Vladimir Putin. And it's an excellent analysis of what he is, and they don't get anywhere near as many views as me basically.
Isn't that mind-blowing?
Well, it doesn't surprise me, because it just tells you everything that you need to know that's wrong with people, that it's bread and circuses, that they would rather than understand the psychological makeup and mindset of a man who could bring about the end of the world. He won't, but he could. Rather than examine that, they're much more interested in, does Harry's wife really have children, and what does that mean? Or is she bitch slapping Harry when he's smoking a blunt in the garden and things like that? And so they're basically interested in the gossip aspect of it. And so the people that watch those videos, there are some people who watch them because they're interested in my dissection of narcissism, but there's a lot of people watch it because basically they don't like Harry's wife, and I'm sarcastic about her because I have to be sarcastic about her, otherwise I'd lose the will to live talking about her. And therefore they just enjoy me basically giving her a bit of a hard time and analysing her narcissism. And of course I analyse lots of other people, but she is just so prominent, it would be remiss not to use her.
I mean, if you could take Harry aside and just say, you could wear a mask and go to a carnival party or something like that, and he would know who you are, and you take the bloke aside and say, hey, listen, hey, dude, like, I got to give you the heads up on this one. I don't know if you've seen my content on your wife, but she's batshit crazy, raging narcissist. I'm going to show you exactly how your life is going to go down the road, because like, this is how it can't go any other different way. Do you think he'd listen to you?
I wouldn't take him to one side, because he wouldn't be prepared to understand. Basically, what I would have to do is abseil down from a helicopter, kick in the windows, basically kidnap him and take him away to a site, and essentially remove his indoctrination. And it would take time just playing football with him and talking to him and sitting down and having dinner with him. A 30 minutes or a 15-minute conversation isn't going to get through to him. You're basically going to have to remove him and reprogram him, in essence, because his level.
I can't imagine he has a community of echo chamber people.
Yeah, he does.
But I mean, like, that's almost like Michael Jackson to me, where nobody could help him because he was surrounded by his echo chamber people. Somebody right. Somewhere to Harry has, hey, listen, dude, there's this guy out there named H.G. Tudor. Brilliant. He's got this content about your wife, nails everything down, like first ballot Hall of Fame. Like, this is what you're dealing with. You need to listen to this guy. Like, go away to a retreat in somewhere and, listen to his entire, catalog, and you're going to get so much more out of your life out of this. Trust me on this one, dude. I got your back on this one. I've known you since we've been to eating together. Just do it. And then Harry would like listen to your content and go like, what do you mean? Like I don't understand what you're talking about.
Well, the problem is at the outset, as soon as he would hear somebody saying, look, your wife's a problem, you need to listen to this material, automatically at that point, because of the level of brainwashing that is experienced, he is programmed to resist it. So he wouldn't even go and indulge in it. You'd have to extract him, sit him down, and a bit like Clockwork Orange, pin his eyes open, and force him to watch it, because the way that he has been, as a consequence of his own emotional thinking, and the way that she's controlled him, and that she's removed him from any positive influences like his brother, like his friends, that if you were to now and go to him and say, look, you and I have known each other a long time, haven't we, Harry? Absolutely. We have wanky trousers. I've known you for years. Okay. Well, I'm really worried about you, mate, because your wife's a narcissist and she's been controlling you. And I've got some material I want you to watch. At that point, you'd be like, mate, don't talk about my wife like that, his own inbuilt inability to understand would kick in, and he would reject it. So even though that person is someone that he knows and trusts, he has been turned against everybody, so that he would turn around and say, "Oh, look, I don't want to fall out with you, mate, but if you're going to insist that my wife's a problem, we're going to have a falling out. She isn't. It's everybody else." He can't see it. The only way, it's a little bit like, imagine that she's radiation, and next to her, he's being poisoned by radiation every single day. What you have to do is remove him from that radiation and take him to another place so that he can't be exposed to it. And then it will bleed away from him and he'll start to wake up. But you can't make him wake up by telling him this is what you must do, because his level of indoctrination is so great, he'll just reject it.
So yes or no answer, do you think he ever gets it?
He doesn't get it. And he is in a folie à deux with her. He's in a shared fantasy with her that she has created, and he's walked into it, and he believes everything. He believes that she's rescued him. He believes that she cares. And if you put in front of him, no matter how forcefully and how expertly, that this isn't the case, he can't. It's like telling somebody who's colorblind they're seeing red when all they can see is gray. He can't see it. He will be able to at a future point, but a one-off sit down is not going to achieve it.
Okay, so you mentioned Putin, and I would be remiss if I didn't go into this because they've been at war with Ukraine for over a year now. Let's go through the pathology of Vladimir Putin, and let's get your take on him.
Well, with Putin, if you want to understand precisely what he is, I'd encourage people to go and watch my video series about him, which will also save my breath talking to you here. So that's what I'd encourage people to do. It won't be a surprise to know that he is of my kind, but in terms of why he is that and what he is, go and watch the videos. And I also have explained what I see is going to happen in terms of how this will all unravel or conclude. So rather than take away people's enjoyment of a detailed breakdown of all of that, I'd encourage them to go and watch the videos about Vladimir Putin, which they'll find at my YouTube site, HG Tudor, Knowing the Narcissist, the Ultra.
And we have the tags up there on the bottom, and we'll put the socials in our post as well for you. That being said, I want to go into your content. My question for all this is, from when you started this years ago to now, what are your biggest takeaways of what you've noticed with people like that have been delving, and I mean delving, into your work? Because I always say you're the unicorn. I don't know any aware narcissists that have been diagnosed, A, and then B, are able to be as like amazingly aware and honest as you are about your own pathology, and be able to share that for other people to have them see, the red flags out there. But what are your takeaways from how your work has been the impact of people out there for what they share to you?
It saves lives. I have people that write to me and say, were it not for you, HG, I'd be dead. The people who say that I have the testimonials which appear on my site. I have a section in my email inbox which is festooned with people's testimonials, whereby they explain how they've finally been able to understand that now they can sleep at night. It's brought them peace, it's brought them calm, it's brought them resolution. It's caused them to gain understanding, and I frequently explain it gives them the key to understanding so much about life. Not only do they understand what happened in that relationship, they now understand why they are the way that they are. They understand why they have the relationship they do with the parent. They understand why the world is the way that it is. They understand why those leaders make those decisions. And so it grants them such a level of understanding. It's huge. And invariably, they always talk about how my work should be taught in schools and so forth, which is absolutely correct. It might be at some point that I scale up on things that I accept some investment so that I move it towards doing all of that and creating a Tudor Academy, as I've alluded to in the past. But the fact is, my work works, and the nature of me being the ultra is that I have this tremendous level of insight, which I utilize, of course, for my own purposes, but it also allows people to gain such a huge level of understanding that they're eternally grateful for what I've given them.
And I am as well, because I'll tell you one thing. Last week, I had a friend of mine in the States that just went through a separation, was assaulted by her husband. I passed her on to your content and just said, you need to have a look at this. And like you said, saves lives. And I think there is an emotional cost of not knowing your content, and there's a physical cost of not knowing your content, and there's not one more hierarchy than the other, because you're going to pay either way. You're either going to pay physically with money, or you're going to pay emotionally with your peace of mind. And the choice is yours. I mean, you can have a look and just say, hey, is your way working? Or there's this fantastic knowledge vault over here behind door number 1, from the source itself, that's going to tell you all the secrets in their book of beats, and share that with you. So that way you have, I always like to say, you have the answers to the Saturday morning test on Friday night. And now you can go into that test on Saturday and just crush it, because HG Tudor's content has given you the ability to see the pathology of what's going to happen before it does, which just makes me look like a genius when I, tell people exactly what's going to happen, because I've watched your content and I've watched you for years and had you on the show, and be able to say, oh, Chuck, how did you know that's going to happen? Like, it exactly played the way you said it was going to play out. And I'm like, I'm not even surprised, because HG Tudor has basically given you all the rules, all the answers in that book. And if you want to go behind the door and look at, you arm yourself with all this information that's might even just save your life, but give you your life back, more importantly.
Absolutely.
Yeah. So what I'd like to do is we'd like to open up the conversation for you to go to HG's site on YouTube. He has hundreds of hours, if not thousands of hours of content. If it is a confronting proposition for you to do that and have a look, because it's a confronting thing to see that your life isn't working, and then being able to blame everybody else around you, and not seeing people for how they are being versus how you want them to be, so that way it serves our agenda. And I think we as people we're very good at that. We want to sit inside our comfort zones and want the world to be how we want it to be, versus really arming ourselves with the knowledge with what it really is, and accepting that. And acceptance is a gift in itself. So if you have the ability to go to HG's YouTube channel, go to his website at narcissist.com as well. We will have all the tabs there for you to go down to and have a look. And I just can't recommend it enough. I truly, this isn't something I'm being paid to say. Obviously I don't. But like the information that you have, HG, that you give people, the ability of having their lives back from this is truly overwhelming.
Thank you for that. And I similarly encourage people to immerse themselves in my work as per the links that you've kindly referenced, Chuck. So thank you.
Yeah, and I want to thank you for coming on the show, HG. It's always a pleasure to have you on board. We're going to keep monitoring the world as it goes by, and hopefully we'll have you back on the show again and see how your predictions always come true.
Okay. I look forward to it. Thank you for having me on.
That is HG Tudor. Like I said, I can't recommend his content enough for you. I think if you're not familiar with what narcissism might look like, you might want to look at, the adjectives that it might progress as: asshole, power monger, control freak, antisocial. These are traits that we might say is neurotypicals or emotional thinking people, about what that is and how that looks. And then from that point there, you want to go and find out why. So yeah, thanks a lot for joining us on the show today. I'm going to bring up my producer, Cam LaRock, and we have a little back and forth to see what his take on that. So Cam, you've been there behind the scenes. What was your take?
Oh, wow, Chuck. Just there's a whole lot to unpack there. HG just has a ton of information, ton of knowledge on everything. You can tell. I've only spent a few hours looking over some of his work, but a lot of it's just amazing. It's breathtaking. It really makes you think. That's really what it comes down to for me.
He said something that was really poignant in the interview that I want to reiterate as well, because I think it's so important.
Yeah.
He said that his content should be taught in schools, and I can't agree more emphatically with that, because we teach calculus and trigonometry for people who are never going to go into the math sciences. And unless you give this information to people so that way they can see this ahead of the curve and they can avoid the train wreck down the road, then from that point there, you're going to be able to see that, avoid the collision before it even happens versus going through that process. And HG's content is just so paramount in arming yourself, either getting out of that situation or avoiding it altogether.
Yeah, absolutely.
So, okay, well, thanks a lot for having us on the show as well. Thanks for inviting us into your room. This is a conversation about narcissism, all things narcissism. Again, HG Tudor's site on YouTube is a fantastic place to start. His Knowledge Vault will give you a timely, content that what you're looking for and answering all your questions as well. I highly recommend you going to his site as well. And that'll do it for this time. So thanks for joining us, and we will see you next time.